Hi everyone, it's Shar. Welcome back to my channel, or welcome if you are new here. I am ready for this year to be over. We have about a month left as I'm recording this. There are about 2 days left in November, and I am actually leaving tomorrow to go on a 2-week solo backpacking trip. I will be vlogging that, but if you want to keep up with me, my Instagram will be right here so you can watch my stories as I go through my 2-week solo backpacking trip. But because I am pre-recording and about to record some anticipated releases for 2023, which I haven't done before, and I'm already excited to look at that video in the future and see how many books that I've read. I feel like with each year I learn my reading taste more and more, and what it is that I am looking for in new releases in books, and trying not to get caught up in hype. With that said, I do have my 2022 journal, which I used for the first half of this year. You can see that it stops in June, and at the beginning of 2022 / the end of 2021, I wrote down some anticipated releases. In the past, I never really cared when a book was released, but this year there were a lot of books that I wanted to read, so I wrote them down. Here's their little spread page. You can already see some things crossed out. Now, my intention with this list was not like, I'm going to read every book on this list. It was more keeping these books on my radar as something that I was excited about. You all already know me, so I don't often really know the full summary of a book before I go into it. I just want the bare bones, and then I'll jump into the book. I'll try to tell you what I know about the book, but bear with me. So the first book on this list is Ophelia After All by Raquel Marie. This is a YA story that released in February of this year. This story follows Ophelia, who is a teenager. She's in her final year of high school. Things around her are changing, and she's always been obsessed with boys until she finds herself obsessing about her friend Talia and wanting to go to prom with her friend Talia and questioning her own sexuality. This is a coming of age story. Now, I am still interested in this book. I just have not read it. I'll probably read it next year. It just isn't super high on the priority list, and that is for no reason than I'm a mood reader and I haven't been in the mood to read a YA book. Book number 2 is How to Sell a Haunted House by Grady Hendrix. This was slotted to be released this year, but it got delayed until next year. So obviously I have not read it. I will say that it's not my fault. It has just not been released. It's not in my hands, but once it is, I will be reading it. I loved Horror Store by Grady Hendrix. I've heard really great things about some of his other books, so I'm excited to read How to Sell a Haunted House when it does release. Then I have Long Live the Pumpkin Queen, very much fueled by my preteen self's obsession with Jack and Sally and a gothic romance. I am who I am, okay? Long Live the Pumpkin Queen by Shay Earnshaw is another YA fantasy that was released in like July this year. Long Live the Pumpkin Queen follows Sally after Jack and Sally come together and her navigating the relationship with being with the king of, what's this town called? I want to say Halloween Town, but that's a different movie, so I know that's not right. But it follows her and their relationship after the movie is over, essentially. I've heard really great things about it. It's not something that I am super interested in, but it's something that I will read if the mood ever strikes me to read a story like that. Then I have Dead Silence by S.A. Barnes, which released at the beginning of the year. This is a horror and sci-fi story. Now, I put this on my list because I kept hearing that it was a story about a haunted ship, and in my mind I was like, I love books set on the ocean. No, not a haunted ship like a boat, a haunted spaceship. They are in space, and once they added in that sci-fi element, I do like sci-fi on the occasion, but I'm not sure how I feel about horror sci-fi. I tried to read this book earlier in the year. I read the first chapter and then I DNF'd it. That was a soft DNF. That was just a, I'm not in the mood for sci-fi horror DNF, and not this book was awful DNF. So I am still interested in this book and do have plans to read it later on for like a giving books I DNF'd a second chance experience. Then we have Insomnia by Sarah Pinborough. This book got fairly popular this year. This story follows a woman who is quickly approaching her 40th birthday, I think. And when her mom reached her 40th birthday, she lost her grip on reality. And now we are following our main character, whose name I've forgotten. We're we're following our main character. She's approaching her 40th birthday. She has 2 kids. She's happily married, but she finds that she cannot sleep and she's starting to hallucinate, and she's wondering if whatever was afflicting her mother is starting to afflict her, and she's concerned about that. I've heard that this book is very slow. I actually have it right next to me, checked out from the library. I've already checked it out twice from the library this year and still haven't read it. I will say that I have read the first 2 chapters, and like dead silence, I have soft DNF'd it. I am still very much interested in the book. It is just something that the mood has not struck me yet to read it. Then we have The Night Shift by Alex Finlay. This was set to release on March 1st of this year. I have not read this and I am no longer interested in this. One, the cover is beautiful, as you can see. I think it's really lovely. I love the idea and the premise of this, which I believe is that in the 80s or the 90s, a bunch of kids who were working at like a Blockbuster, I think, were murdered. And we're like several years in the future at an ice cream shop. I could be making up the locations, but same idea. And there's another note and murders happening. Now, I was going to read this, but I saw some of the reviews. I know that it heavily involves detective, and I was like, oop, not interested anymore. And I know that this detective is also heavily pregnant. Many reviews that I saw mentioned that it just felt unrealistic in how it was portrayed and that it was very slow. So no longer interested in that, mainly because I don't want to read about a detective. The next book on this list is Gallant by V.E. Schwab, which is a YA fantasy that was also released on March 1st of this year. I did read this book. I am so happy to say I read this in June when I was doing whatever-a-thon. I not only read this book, I loved it. So Gallant follows this young orphaned girl who is living at this home. It's a home where a lot of other orphaned girls live. She gets a letter from her uncle saying, "We've been looking for you for years. Please come up to Gallant." So she goes up to Gallant and realizes that Gallant may be haunted. There are some darker secrets in there, and our main character is mute. She can't speak, and she's talking about trying to navigate the world when people are not willing to accommodate for her. It's a fantasy, so Gallant, if you look at the cover, there's 2 houses, so almost like a portal fantasy, I would say, and I loved this book. So I put it on my most anticipated, and 2021 me was right in that I would really enjoy this book. I have another YA romance on this list, which I find hilarious. As I continue to read and learn my reading taste, I find that YA falls into 2 camps. It was just okay, or it's like my favorite thing ever, but more often than not, it falls into just okay. So I'm slowly veering away from that category. Not that I'll never read YA, because obviously that's not true, but more in that I'm trying to find what it is that I like in YA so I can read those books. So for this YA romance book, we have I Kissed Shara Wheeler by Casey McClickston. I just heard this book was boring. There's no big secret about it. This book is about a main character, and she has kissed this girl named Sarah Wheeler, and then Sarah apparently kissed a bunch of people and went missing, and it's some kind of mystery, but I just heard that it was very boring, and I've heard most people say the exact same thing, so I just decided I wasn't interested in it. Then we have Belladonna by Adeline Grace. She's actually sitting right behind me on my Fairy Loot shelf. Now, this is a story about a girl who cannot die, and she has some kind of romantic entanglement with death, who is obsessed with her. This book was released on August 23rd of 2022. For some reason, I classed it as a mystery. It's not a mystery. Anyway, I was really excited about this. I am still really excited about it. I am gonna do a Fairy Loot reading vlog, which I just keep pushing off. I'm still interested in this book, but I'm gonna say I'm hesitantly interested in this book because it is a love triangle, but one of the characters is a freaking stable boy. How is stable boy gonna compete with death? Please tell me. The nonsense, the foolishness. Anyway, I am going to read this book. I'm still interested in this book, but I am very cautious about how much I'm going to enjoy this book, knowing that there is an unnecessary third character. And I haven't even read the book, and I'm going to stick by that and say that third character is unnecessary. Then I have Love on the Brain by Ali Hazelwood. This is a contemporary romance released in August of this year. I've read The Love Hypothesis by Ali Hazelwood, and I loved it. I read Below Zero, one of the feminist novellas by Ali Hazelwood, and I hated it. So I was really excited to see how I would feel about Love on the Brain. If you're not new to my channel and you've seen my previous vlogs, then you will know that I loved Love on the Brain. I absolutely adored it. Yes, it got ridiculous towards the end, but I gave it 4.5 stars and it was a great time. Love on the Brain follows B, who is a scientist who wants to work at NASA. She gets the job, but it's with her old TA who hated her for some reason. His name is Levi, but it's a situation where she thinks he hates him and meanwhile he's completely in love with her. I loved it. It was a great time. I'm so happy I put it on this list. Again, 2021 me was right in knowing that I would want to read this book, and I did read and love it. Then we have The It Girl by Ruth Ware, which released this summer. The It Girl is kind of like a thriller mystery where we have a group of friends who centered around this girl, the It Girl, who was very rich and very popular, and she mysteriously dies. Someone gets convicted for her murder, and then years later people are saying there's no way this man could have killed her. So we're following our main character who is interviewing the friend group and trying to figure out what exactly happened to this girl, because her only memory, I think, is that she just wakes up and she finds her friend dead. I haven't read this yet, but I know the audiobook is on Scribd, so I do have plans to read this. I'm thinking that when I come back from my trip, it's one of the first books I'm going to get to. So unread, but still interested and may read in this year. All right, then we have The Overnight Guest by Heather Gudenkoff. This is a thriller that was released at the beginning of the year in January. I think this is an isolated thriller, so we're following this woman who lives at a cabin and then some creepy shit happens. That is the extent of what I know. That's the extent of what I needed to know. I will tell you, I've tried to read this book twice this year. I have DNF'd it both times. The writing just doesn't work for me. I tried it physically and I tried it in audiobook and it just didn't work for me. So maybe one day I'll be in a completely different mood and it will suddenly work for me, but this is a book that I tried and DNF. All right, coming to the end of the list and our final few books, we have The Book of Cold Cases by Simone St. James. This is a thriller that was released in March. I did read this book and I didn't like it. This book follows a woman who writes a true crime blog, and one day when she's working at the doctor's clinic, she works there, a patient comes in and she realizes it's this woman who was infamously known as a killer, a serial killer. She was never convicted, and my girl's I have to interview her. And surprisingly, this woman agrees to the interview and says, come to my house. But this house is hella fucking haunted, and you would think that would make an interesting story, but it does not. The dual timelines did not work for me. I thought it was very slow. It was hard for me to understand what was happening. I needed more action. I needed more details, and it just felt like a very long interview about nothing. Then I have Siren Queen by Nevo. This was released in May of this year, I believe. Look at this cover. It's so beautiful. It looks gorgeous. I think this is a Great Gatsby retelling maybe, and it is unread and uninterested. As beautiful as this cover is, I never liked The Great Gatsby, and I haven't heard the greatest things about this book. I've heard that it's pretty slow and pretty boring. Again, that doesn't mean that I will never pick it up. It just means it's not something that I am currently interested in at this point. Then we have a book that I don't know why I put on this list. I'm sure I had my reasons back in 2021, but we have A Brush with Love by Maisie Eddings. This is a romance that was released in March of this year. So this is obviously a dentist romance. They're in dental school. She has this encounter. I literally just looked at her name and already forgot it. But she has an encounter with this man. They decide to just be friends, but of course there's too much tension between them and it doesn't work. That's all I know. It's set at dental school. I've heard that it's cute. I'm not interested anymore because it doesn't sound like my thing. That doesn't mean that I'm never going to read it. It just means it's something that I'm not interested in right now. And the final book on this list for most anticipated books of 2022 for me was The Wedding Crasher by Mia Sosa. This is a contemporary romance that was released in April of this year. This story follows a woman who gets roped into helping her wedding planner cousin with a wedding, but she stumbles upon a scene. I think the bride is cheating on the groom. She tells him and they call off the whole wedding. But The groom is like, this is a marriage of convenience. I just wanted to make partner. It's a love story between the two of them. I'm no longer interested in this because I heard some reviews that the groom was actually just a dickhead throughout the whole thing, and that's not my thing. So I've decided I'm no longer interested in it. Those are all of the books that I was most excited for in 2022 when I made this list in 2021. You can see the stats here on the screen so you can get a sense of where I stand with the 16. Of the 16 books I was anticipating this year, how many did I read, how many did I DNF, and how many am I still interested in? So all the stats are here for you to take a look at. Thank you so much for watching this video as always. I really appreciate it. If you aren't already and you would like to, please do hit that subscribe button. It would mean a lot to me and really support these videos and my channel. And with that said, I will see you in my next video. Bye.